Welcome to You, Me, Empathy, a safe place for leading with your heart. Hey, thanks for being here. You, Me, Empathy is the official podcast of the Feely Human Collective, a collaborative mental health community designed to empower each of us to grow our capacity for empathy, vulnerability, and emotional wayfinding. Just a friendly reminder that this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only and is not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. No one is just a silly boy with a feely heart. You can support the show by leaving a review in Apple Podcasts, following us on social media at Yumi Empathy and Feely Human, and joining the Feely Human Collective community at feelyhuman.co. And now your host, Known Wells.
Hello, Feely Humans. Welcome to another episode of You, Me, Empathy. This is episode 144. We are inherently worthy of the things that are good for us. Let me repeat that. We are inherently worthy of the things that are good for us. And my guest on this show today is Jess Sprengle. Jess is an eating disorder therapist. So we talk about eating disorder behaviors, her experience with eating disorder, my experience with an eating disorder. So the content warning for this episode is that we do talk about eating disorders. We also talk about growing up as bookworms, looking back at our childhood selves with compassion. Jess shares her experience as a therapist and what got her into eating disorder therapy. We talk about accessibility to eating disorder therapy, why insurance sucks, getting lost in books. We talk about meme culture because Jess is the queen of meme. We also talk about recent joys, books and stuff we've been watching. This is I really enjoyed this conversation with Jess. She is wonderful. She's an Austin-based therapist. So if you're in the Austin area, check her out. She is on Instagram, mostly. She's at The Cranky Therapist on Instagram, at The Cranky Therapist. Give her a follow. She's wonderful. And did I mention she loves memes? So there's that thing. She loves memes. It's kind of fun. Anyways, before we get to the episode, I just wanted to remind you to please, if you have a moment, 1 minute of your time, maybe 2 minutes if it's a longer review, but please go to Apple Podcasts right now and leave a rating and review for Yumi Empathy. It does really help out the show. It's a free way to support me and the work I do and these wonderful guests like Jess on the show. And again, it just takes a moment. If you like the show, please go and give it a rating and review. The more reviews, the better access to, bigger guests. The more people see the show, the more it climbs in the charts, and hopefully more people can get access to these wonderful, healing, empathetic conversations. So please do that if you can. The other thing is, if you haven't subscribed to the Feely Human newsletter, that is at feelyhuman.co, feelyhuman.co. If you go to the homepage there, scroll down to the bottom, sign up for the newsletter. I will be sending out the next issue of the Feely Human newsletter this week. So give that a subscribe soon. Right now, if you can, go do it. It's great stuff. I write a lot of personal musings, a lot of great self-care tips, and certainly a lot of pictures of my dogs. So go do that. That's at feelyhuman.co. What else is going on? I guess I hope you guys are doing okay. It's a weird time still. Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, and that's tremendously sad. We lost a good one. Rest in power, Ruth. California seems to be on fire. Smoke is bad. COVID-19 is still going on, and so lots of rough stuff. And I just hope that you're taking care of yourself. I hope that you are taking care of your heart and giving yourself the care that you deserve, because you are inherently worthy of the good things, the things that serve you, and you and only you are the person who knows what serves you and what fills your heart. So I hope you're taking care of yourself. You deserve it. I'm so grateful you're here. So grateful that you're engaging with empathy and vulnerability. And if you want to do more of that, check out feelyhuman.co. If you like to write, if you like to, if you're an artist and want to do a collaboration with Feely Human, let me know. Go to feelyhuman.co and learn more there. Join the community. Follow Yumi Empathy on Instagram at Yumi Empathy. We also have a Facebook group and a page. Check it out. Just search for Yumi Empathy. And follow Feely Human at Feely Human, and on Facebook, Feely Human Collective. And again, leave a review for Yumi Empathy. That would be wonderful. Also, if you want to support me and the work I do financially, you can just go to feelyhuman.co/support. Check that out. Okay, let's get to the episode, shall we? This is with my lovely friend, Jess Sprengle, who's an eating disorder therapist. We talk about eating disorders and growing up as bookworms and looking back at our childhood selves with compassion and why we are inherently worthy of the things that are good for us. Enjoy.
La la la, you, me, empathy, yeah, la la la.
Welcome to You, Me, Empathy, the official podcast of the Feely Human Collective. On this show, we explore the struggles, the triumphs, the brights, and the darks we face as humans trying to get by on this wondrous and overwhelming pale blue dot. The intent of Yumi Empathy is to talk openly, without judgment, about our mental health, our neuroses, our shared anxieties and worries, to create a dialogue that is vulnerable and deeply human and empathetic, and to share that dialogue with others to inspire emotional and cognitive collaboration and insight so we can, hand in hand, break down the stigma that make us feel shame and guilt for struggling, for feeling our feelings, for being feely humans. Yumi Empathy is a safe, friendly space designed to inspire the beauty in each of us. Today, I'm the opposite of cranky because I'm here with licensed professional counselor, eating disorder and body image healer, and apparently queen of the meme, Jess Sprengle. Hello, Jess.
Hello, Noam. Thank you so much. That's an amazing intro.
So happy to have you here, friend. The listeners should know that Jess was previously a guest on like a special episode with a few different therapists all around the coronavirus, in the early days of coronavirus.
Yes, before we knew that it would be lasting for what feels like a millennia.
Yeah, it's gosh, we were so wrong back then. We've learned so much.
Oh, we have, and I mean, I guess in some ways, the good thing is we have just an endless supply of memes. So that's been great. I have not had to really search and scour the internet for good memes because they're just all available and about COVID.
Right. So I mentioned in the intro, you're the queen of meme, and you actually even have that hashtag in your Instagram profile, which I find very, very funny. What is it about memes that you like?
That is a great question. It's funny because I had just like started randomly posting. I think they were like wholesome, like cute mental health memes on Mondays, and this is like over a year ago now. And I hadn't really thought much of it. I knew that people were really into memes, but I hadn't really like done any sort of deep dive into, I don't know, meme culture. But people really loved it. Everyone was like about it. I was like, okay, well, I mean, I have this little platform in the internet sphere, and I may as well give people what they want. So I started doing weekly memes, and I try to create a variety, and I do spend the week like looking for them. It is a labor of love, which is always a weird thing to admit, but it is. And I don't know, like I feel like memes now are this like way that humans communicate or express their feelings, and it's almost like a way to destigmatize mental health in a way, because it's just something that people can point to and be like, holy shit, like that, I get it, like that makes sense, that's what I experienced too. And it's not like, it doesn't always have to be this like very emotional sensitive experience. It can be just, oh, look at this like little graphic and I'm laughing at it and someone else feels the same.
Yeah, that's well said. I I have less of a penchant for memes, and maybe that's just because I'm a little older. I'm not sure, but like there is a truth. They're speaking a truth. They're like reflecting on truths that we hold in society, and they can be very. I think they're useful because they can bring us into conversations that are maybe deeper or reflective of our internal states or what have you. And I could see from you coming from the perspective of like being a therapist and teaching about mental health and therapy and body image awareness, like I see how they can be useful tools to initiate conversation around maybe bigger topics.
Sure. And I mean, it's funny, clients will send me memes regularly, which, I mean, it cracks me up. I don't think I mean, every therapist has different sentiments around boundaries, and everyone has the capacity to set their own. I do let most of my clients text me. I don't think that's really problematic, so long as both sides respect it. And yeah, I mean, I do have a bunch that will send me memes, or like even like during session, they'll talk to me about like a meme they found that made them think about like our sessions or about me. And I don't know, I think it just makes me feel kind of special in a way where it is this like unique way of communicating with people. And I do see a lot of young folks. So that, I mean, I don't know, I feel like that's like its own special language in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point. So let's we always start the show, Jess, with an emotional check-in. How are you feeling? How has the week been for you?
Great question. Today I am feeling a little tired, which I know is not really an emotion. But I mean, this was a tougher week for me. I'm not sure why. It felt like clients were really struggling, and I think sometimes, therapists are human. At the end of the day, like I am a human first, therapist second, and I do absorb some of my clients' feelings sometimes. And in Texas right now, things with COVID are especially bad, and clients are certainly feeling that, and I'm certainly feeling that. And that's just been a lot to sit with this past week, especially because it does create this really uncomfortable feeling of, yeah, this is going to be going on for a lot longer. And like, we're not going to see each other in person. And like, what does that look like moving forward? Is this really enough for people? So I think there have been a lot of big questions this week, and I mean, I don't have any answers, which I think makes things challenging too, because most of the time in the therapeutic sphere, I mean, the therapist doesn't necessarily have the answers, but I can't say that I'm usually feeling exactly what clients are feeling, whereas right now, that is more of a common experience, because I think we're all a little lost at sea right now.
Yeah.
So I guess a long put a bow on it, I would say I feel tired, and I certainly feel overwhelmed by just the state of the world.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things. You don't need to put a bow on it. It could just be messy and what it is, right? We don't need to pack it up and make it look nice. Who gives a shit? It is what it is.
True.
The other thing is, like, I wonder, like you mentioned, kind of feeling some of the emotions of your clients and taking on maybe some of that. Is that just like you? Is that just your humanity? Is there a place where, like, you as a therapist don't do that and can't do that, or is that like, your superpower, and that's what makes you a good therapist, and with that comes, these understood, quote unquote consequences of being an empathic, feely, want to meet your patients where they are type of a therapist?
Sure. So I would agree that like a lot of it is my humanity and just my authenticity and being able to like meet clients where they are and feel some of what they're feeling. However, I think on like in some ways it could be problematic where it becomes like vicarious trauma where you're hearing really painful things from clients and absorbing it in a way that's not healthy for you, which I think every therapist experiences that on some level. I've been pretty fortunate in that has not really been as much of an issue for me, just because I feel like I am pretty stellar at compartmentalizing, which as a therapist, I think you have to develop that skill. But yeah, I mean, I think it's important as a therapist to, yes, meet clients where they are with your humanity and authenticity, but also be able to have some sort of boundary around, like, you're not totally immersed in it with them, in that you're the life raft in the situation, like you're above the water and like reaching for them versus like you're both in the water together and like doggy paddling and there's like you don't really have any resources, if that makes sense.
Mm. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Hearing you say that makes me think about my wife Jessica, who's a teacher. She teaches community college level English, and she's a type of person who has a tremendous heart and wants to help so much, right? And wants to wants to make sure these students succeed and understand what she's trying to relay in her stories, in the stories that they review as a class and all these things. And I know that that's a hard place to be because like she's, I think, putting her emotions on the outcome of like her students, which I think is just ultimately probably like it's a double-edged sword, right? Like she has this tremendous heart, she cares, but like it's like, where do you draw the line? Where do you create that boundary? Where do you say, okay, ultimately, and this is for you, Jess, like ultimately, like I can only do so much as a therapist. Like it's a two-way street, right?
Right. Yeah, and I think it's a skill that over time requires just a lot of honing and like tweaking, because I mean, I know in my early career, especially like I was quite young when I started my career. I was only 24, which I mean that's pretty standard for folks who like go right from undergrad to grad. So I was 24 years old. I worked at I worked at a psych ER, so like little me, very green. Like I wanted to help everybody, and it's really hard at that place, like to not absorb other people's pain and want to, and just feel really invested in the outcome. Which I think, like even now, I'm certainly invested in my clients and invested in their recoveries, but I'm not invested in the outcome. Like
Mm,
I can't predict what's going to happen for them. I can only support them in what they want to do next and what they want to do now. But I can't put stock in what might or might not happen because it's not my
mm,
recovery. It's not my life. I mean, I've already done my recovery and I'm living my own life. So it's, I can't put all of that energy into them because then it's like that just creates a whole other strange dynamic of them doing it for me. or thinking
Yeah.
like I'm going to be disappointed in them. And I never want clients to feel that way.
Right, right. No, that's so well said. I love that. So let's talk a little bit about like um, where you came from and sort of like the story that led you here. So the question I always like to ask my guests is, could you share a moment or two, a seminal moment or two that from your childhood or from young adulthood, just when you look back on your life, like some seminal memories that speak to who you are today? They could be, struggles, they could be traumas, they could be, moments of clarity and joy, but just really seminal moments that really speak to who you are as a person now.
Hmm. It's so funny. I don't know why this is the first memory that comes to mind, but I'm going to share it.
Please.
When I was a kid, I was an avid reader. I think that is just I was a bookworm. That was like my nickname growing up. And
What were your fave books
oh
growing
God,
up?
I really read anything I could get my hands on. I'm actually blanking on what some of my favorite books were, but because I just read everything. Like I really loved Beverly Cleary, which I feel like is like I feel like so many kids really liked her back when like when I was a kid, and now I'm like some of those books are so stupid. But either way, like they very sweet stuff like that. But like I loved fantasy. I loved realistic. What is it? Historical fiction or realistic fiction. I really just wanted to read it all. And when I was 7, my family was Catholic, so that's the age when you receive the sacrament of communion, which is really like beyond the scope of this podcast. I would not be able to explain it to folks who are not Catholic. It's just a rite of passage. I don't know. It's a bizarre.
This is what you don't know about You Me Empathy, Jess, is it's the #1 Catholic podcast on
Yeah.
iTunes.
I'm glad it's not. But I wanted to bring a book with me to my communion, which like I had to, you have to wear like this little white dress and like it's in a church. So it's really like this is an event. It's not something you can like sit in the background of and like read a book during. So my parents were furious, and finally I just shoved the book like into like under my dress, hoping that I don't know, no one would see like a book-sized bulge under under my dress. And I feel like that just really encapsulates who I was as a child. Just really like wanting to do my own thing, but also like not wanting to upset anybody. Just really wanting to like get lost in a book, even during something that was supposed to be like this, very big event in my life.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, I think that just really shows who I was as a kid. And so that's a bit of a funny memory, but I guess a more serious second memory.
Hold on, I'd love to unpack that
Yeah,
first memory a little bit, because
absolutely.
it makes me happy, first of
Yeah.
all, to think of you as that 7-year-old little voracious reader. I loved reading as well. And for me, there was a lot of escape. For me, it was about escaping. It was about kind of escaping the world that I lived, and some of the things I didn't want to confront or deal with or was scared of in my real life. And books allowed me, an escape, a space to feel comfortable, to go on adventures with hobbits and to read Where the Red Fern Grows, like for the 400th time, things like that. And I have, like, when you said that you brought your book to your communion, it's such a, like, that's such a pure, innocent joy. The thought that like you're going to find time like in the in between to read. It's such a
I know.
beautiful joy. Like that makes me so happy. So like, I guess like, what is it like? What is like when you think of that kid? You said like, wanting to do your own thing. What is like? What is that? Talk to me about that kid. Who was that kid? What was she like? Like, were you? Was it a strict household? Did you feel like you needed to escape? Like, let's unpack it a bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of my reading was certainly an escape. I think that was a huge part of it for me. I mean, I think even from when I was like a little one, I just am different from my family in a lot of ways, and not in a bad way necessarily. I think I'm a lot more sensitive. I mean, I think just especially as a kid, I was a highly sensitive kiddo, um, and super anxious about everything. And I mean, I feel like there were so many red flags that should have probably like highlighted for my parents, like, oh, hey, like we should probably get our kids some therapy. But I mean, it was definitely a coping skill reading,
Mm.
and a way to just like fuck off from the world around me. Because I would say, like, by the time I was 7, my parents divorced when I was 9, late 9, almost 10. And I would say, like, my house was a pretty tumultuous place just because of that, because my parents fought a lot. And reading was just a way
Verbal, physical.
verbal. It was
Hmm.
certainly no physical stuff, but it was still like, as a child, listening to a lot of that is really traumatizing. And
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
knew it. I think even at 7, I was like, yeah, this isn't good for me to like be privy to. So I think it was really, really very much a way for me to like escape from that.
Mm. Yeah. I relate to that very much. So, what? So when your parents divorced, what happened then?
Ooh, so I think I was nearly 10, and things just sort of blew up, and I don't know that my parents were especially well matched anyway. So I think, interestingly, at the end of the day, like, I think I'm really grateful that they got divorced because I cannot imagine the rest of my life with them having been married. I think that would have been really unfortunate for all people involved. But
Yeah.
as a child, it was really devastating because I went to Catholic school and most of my friends had parents who were married. So um, it was seen as like this very negative thing, like, oh, if your parents are divorced, like there's something wrong with you. Which, in
Yeah.
retrospect, like I don't really know why that was the messaging.
I remember that messaging. It was like a sin, right?
Yeah, like it's because like marriage is a sacrament, so to like I don't know, to end a marriage is like like unholy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I don't know. I'm very glad that they ended their marriage because it just wasn't working for them. But yeah, so there was definitely a lot of shame involved, from a really young age, around like, oh, like my parents are divorced. There must be something wrong with me. And I think just as a very sensitive kid, I blamed myself for my parents' divorce, which, like, looking back, I'm like, okay, little 9-year-old Jess, like, I'm so glad you thought that you could end a 20-year relationship. That's real cute.
I mean, it's so common though, right? It's because that's what I did. I mean, as the sensitive, person in my family, I took on so much of it emotionally, and I blame myself, and it just became this like self-hating nightmare because, ultimately there was nothing I could do, right?
Right.
you know and
Control.
it's yeah, poor little Jess taking on that burden.
Yeah, it was certainly there was a lot of energy put into that. And I would say not long after, um, eating disorder behavior started, or at least like some semblance of weirdness around food. So, it's the line is really direct for me, where it's like,
Mm.
oh, I had this like major trauma in childhood. And I was also just like already a really sensitive, cute kid and just took on the whole world, like wanted to just fix everything and control everything. So of course, it's food's what you have in front of you as a kid. And that was where a lot of my stuff with that started.
Yeah. What did it look like initially, that disordered eating?
It's interesting because for a long time I thought that my eating disorder started at 13, when more like restrictive patterns with food started, which I think is interesting. There is always that like attention given to, especially in the eating disorder world, like more of the like restrictive stuff, because that seems like so enormously problematic, especially for a young person.
Yeah.
But I look back and I think like around 10, I started using food to cope, and just trying to like make myself feel better with food, which yeah, as a little kid, of course, like that's, you want, like when you do like well on a test, like, and you get rewarded with ice cream. It's like, I think there was some knowledge that I could feel better if I like ate something particular or
Mm.
ate things in a particular way. Um, I also like became just really convinced that people were watching me eat, which is like, again, like I think this is all retrospective. I don't think like any of it was really conscious at the time,
Yeah.
but I can remember like being in a restaurant and crying because I thought like the lady across the way was like watching me and judging me with
Mm.
like with what I was eating, and I was like 10 years old. So it's such a interesting thing to look back on, because clearly like that was well before like 13 and when like other stuff started. So but it still counts. Like, it's still like very much part
Yeah.
of my eating disorder history, and probably should have been a pretty big red flag to my parents, but unfortunately back then, and not, it's not so long ago that eating disorders weren't on people's radar, but certainly not, it's not the same as it is today, where like, I don't know, you can open an internet browser and get like smacked in the face with eating disorder stuff. It's like,
Right.
just wasn't the same 20 years ago.
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah. No, I feel that. And it's such a, Jess, as someone who also has a past of eating disorders, I feel for people going through it, and I feel for you who went through it. It's such a, it's triggered usually by a trauma, right? And then we traumatize ourselves in the most brutal way. Like,
Mm.
it's such a brutal experience. And for those listening who have been through it, who are going through it, my heart goes out to you, because it's brutal. It's so brutal.
It is. It really is. And I think back on that like little version of myself, and I feel so much compassion now, which I did not have the capacity for even in my early recovery. I think I had a lot of judgment. Um,
Yeah.
Although now I would say, like 11 years plus in, like I absolutely have compassion for that like baby version of myself, just trying to figure shit out. Like that was my way of working with the world that was in front of me. And I think honestly, I think being a therapist has provided me so much perspective around that. Like being able to have compassion for kiddos that are, that are my like the age that I was, like they are. And I can see like, yeah, they're not having a great time. Like, they're really going through it. So if I can have compassion for them, I can absolutely have compassion for that younger me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's essential to be able to, as humans, look back on our child selves and have compassion, because it's tough being a child, and it's especially tough when you're experiencing trauma, big T, little t trauma. Like it's taking on that as a kid. We need to have compassion for those kiddos because, we don't have much choice, right? It's, we're sort of subjected to it in a lot of ways.
Right. And I think
Yeah.
inner child work is a big part of the work that I do with clients because so many people, their eating disorder experiences or just mental health experiences begin in childhood because we have, mental health is a non-negotiable. We all, have to have an inner emotional world, and some of us struggle more than others, but it's something that regardless of who you are, it's part of who you are. So it's,
Yeah.
really being able to feel compassion and empathy for that like little version of yourself that maybe, didn't know how to cope with stuff or like just was trying to do their best.
Yeah, absolutely. So how did you, you were 10 at the time and you started, experiencing some things. And then you said at 13, you started restricting.
Yeah. So at 13, so that was in eighth grade, things, and it's interesting because my husband asked me recently, like, how did that start for you? Like, did you just decide one day, like, oh, like, I'm just gonna like do this thing? And honestly, so far as I remember it, yeah, like it just was like 0 to 100 in a matter of like a day, where I was just like, yeah, tomorrow I think I'm gonna like start restricting my food. I don't know like what motivated me to do that. I don't know. It's just such a bizarre
Mm.
thing to think about. Because it just seemed so cut and dry. And like there was no argument around it. It was just like, I'm going to do this. And obviously at 13, like I did not really have any insight around like what consequences would be of that. Because that's, as a teenager, no one's really thinking about consequences. Um, but yeah. And so like when that started, it continued until I was 19. Um, but I mean, obviously, there's a lot of years in between 13 and 19, where what started as restricting morphed and migrated to a number of other behaviors, and ultimately landed me in treatment a few times, and like really put me in a pretty bad spot in my life, which is scary to think about, but yeah, I mean, my eating disorder was a huge part of my life for just about all of my teenage years.
Hmm. What did you learn about yourself during that time? Because I know for me, I, I mean, I only in retrospect, I look back on my period of time, and it was a little bit later. It probably started, 17 through, mid 20s or something. And I, looking back on that kiddo, I know that now I have like I have just so much more awareness, right, of self. And looking back on that kid, I realized I like was immensely sensitive and I didn't realize it, right? I realized like I was dealing with depression and I didn't realize it. Like all these things that we learn in retrospect. What for you, like what did you learn about yourself? Or what have you learned about yourself looking back on that specific period?
Whew, so many things. Well, I think interestingly, the more I look back, the more I stop blaming myself. I think like that version of myself felt so immensely responsible for everyone else's suffering that occurred because of my eating disorder,
Mm.
if that makes sense. Because most people that were close to me knew that I had an eating disorder. It was, and not necessarily because of how I looked, but just behavior. I was pretty entrenched and was not really willing to do things differently. And interestingly, my parents left me alone to do what I wanted to do. And because again, I think there was just a lot of misunderstanding about eating disorders back then, and there were not a lot of resources. So I would say from like 13 to 16, I mean, I kind of carried on as I wanted to.
Mm.
And, I look back on that, and there were a lot of times where I know that I acted out and was unkind to people because, I think being a teenager and having a mental illness, just not a great combination. And I mean, even and during that time, interestingly, it was not nearly as bad as it later developed into being, because I would say like the worst of it was between like maybe 16 and 19. But I still, regardless of the timing, I felt very responsible for many years later for how anybody felt during that time. Like, oh, I've hurt these people and I have to spend the rest of my life making it up to them for how hurt they were by my eating disorder. And I mean, I took on a lot of responsibility, which again, like looking back, I'm not obviously I'm not blameless. Something I tell clients is like having a mental illness does not give you license to be an asshole. I certainly don't think that I I don't think it was cool for me to be unkind to people sometimes. But I also recognize that I was a kid, and
Yeah.
these were things that like I was doing because it felt like the only things that I had control over. It felt like it was really the only things that I could do to survive. And I can't blame myself for that. And I can't think that, I'm responsible for everyone else's suffering because I don't know, I'm not God. Like I'm not like so powerful that I have all of this ability to really harm people. It's like people cared about me. Of course they were going to be hurt by things I was doing. And I think that's really what I learned. It's like when people care about you, they take on some of your stuff and they want you to get better. They love you. And I think for a long time I just was so convinced that no one cared about me and I was just like causing them unnecessary harm. So
Mm.
I mean, looking back, I'm really glad that I've been able to move on to that place of like, no, I'm not 100% responsible for how people felt. And I was a kid. Like, there's only so much that I was going to be able to do to prevent people from feeling sad that I was sick.
Yeah. Yeah. You also said a very important thing, which is you called the eating disorder a mental illness, which I think is an important thing to call out here because I've heard, people, incorrect people say that there's like you're making a choice or something when
Right.
you right restrict or things like that. But the reality is it's a mental illness, and you're can you, I guess, as a therapist, like how, like when you think about it now, in the work that you do with clients, how do you make that distinction for them or talk about that specific piece of it being mental illness?
That is a great question. Well, I think part of it, like even just thinking about it from my own experience, like as much as there is a component of it that feels like an active choice.
Mm,
However, it's like the way that I usually will frame it to clients is like, okay, like how much of your day is spent thinking about food, exercise, like uh, behaviors, like self-worth, like all of these things, like how much of your life is occupied by like these things that feel like a choice. And like if you could, can you click a button and turn it off? And most of the time, of course, the answer is no. Um like it's one of those things where like I look back and I can't believe that at some point even in my own life I did feel like it was a choice, like, and I was making the conscious choice to choose my eating disorder,
right.
which like it's just such a strange thought now because it's such a miserable experience. No one would choose it. I mean, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, the
Yeah.
just suffering that it is. And that I think is a lot of what I try to orient clients to. It's like no one would make the conscious choice to take on all of the things that go with the behavior. Because even if it, at the end of the day, like, yes, you might say, like, I'm not going to eat this meal. Like, what comes with that? Like, it's not just that choice.
Right. Right. Yeah. No. That's so well said. And thinking about it in that way is important because I think about the the choice of eating disorder is a choice of immense suffering. But like I think like I'm reflecting back on my experience and like thinking about that, and it almost for me it almost became like this weird, twisted, fucked up sense of pride, right? Like I have this thing, and I know maybe part of me knows that it's not good, that it's destroying me, that I am on the swift road to death. And yet, and this is the illness, I tell myself, this is my identity, this is who I am, this is what I need, this is what I deserve, right? And that's the maybe like the illness choice, like mess of it all that we get into.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I relate to that. Because it becomes your identity.
Yeah.
And like, of course, you're going to try, like, your mind is going to try to find some way to feel pride in it because it's your identity. And I mean, I know for so long I just thought, well, this is who I am, and there isn't really much I can do about it. And so, like, it almost became like this quirky part of my personality, which is just
Mm,
so fucked up and strange. But it was like, oh, like, this is, Jess, she's the one with the eating disorder. Like, great.
yeah.
That's so great. I think that was just a survival mechanism. It was a way to just help me move along.
Right. Right. Yeah. Otherwise, we're just um, maybe we're dying. Otherwise, like it's like yeah, survival mechanism. I think is a good word for it. Yeah. It's such a hard place to be. So when you talk to your clients, Jess, about like, because you're working with kids, like how young are your patients?
So I used to work almost exclusively with adolescents
Mm,
earlier in my career. I would say that was like my first 3 years or so, maybe even four. But then since I've moved to Texas, because I originally started practicing in New Jersey. Since I
hmm
moved here, I've had a little bit more variety in my caseload, and I actually have moved from seeing like 13 to 21 to like 13 to full adulthood, like 40s, 50s, with the bulk of my caseload being more in like the, I guess, young adult category. So like more of
mm,
like an 18 to 30 place,
hmm
which I think I prefer because as much as I love teenage clients. They are the best. They teach me so many amazing things and also just crack me the fuck up. Parents are a lot to deal with, and it's very hard to balance managing a lot of parents and a full caseload. So unfortunately, I've had to move a little bit away from that.
Interesting. So what kind of like I could see that be an issue, especially uh especially when you have like a parent who's maybe wanting to control or wanting to project or bring themselves into it. Did you experience some of that?
Oh yeah. So it's interesting. I think um, when I initially started practicing on the East Coast, I mean, people are just different across the board. Like in New York and New Jersey, it's just there's a whole different personality display. There's just like a lot of hands off, and I had difficulties with parents, but I also felt like there was a little bit more nuance and a little bit more like trusting the professional. Where like down here in Texas, I do feel like parents tend to be involved for a lot longer in their kids' lives, and are pretty much the exact opposite of being hands off in just about every single imaginable way.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I yeah. I mean, this is not a parenting podcast, but it is the number one parenting podcast.
Yeah. Number one Catholic and parenting
weirdly,
podcast.
yeah, that's interesting. So how does, like, you obviously having experienced your own sort of eating disorder history, um, why go back into it to study it and to help others through it? I mean, maybe the answer is simple, but I'm just curious, like, of your sort of thought process in that.
That is a great question. So it's interesting because I think that answer has changed over time. Um, when I was younger, and especially like I when I like first went to treatment, I think I had this sense of obligation, which I'm not really sure where I pulled that from, but at the same time, like I am that type of person, so of course, where I just felt like, oh, I've been profoundly helped by the eating disorder field, and like people have put in a lot of energy and effort into my recovery, and I want to give that back. And I mean, that was all well and good for a few years. And then I like kind of hit a crisis where it was like, oh my God, like, is this actually what I want to do? Or do I just feel like, I don't know, do I feel like I have to? So I had to do some soul searching around that. And ultimately I landed on like, yeah, I am going to go into becoming a therapist, but I'm not going to treat eating disorders right away. And I'm going to just like do therapy things. And if I end up like treating eating disorders along the way, great, but that's like not what I'm going to pigeonhole myself into doing.
Mm.
So that I think was really profound for me, that I got to see like a lot of other areas of mental health. It wasn't just immediately like, oh, I have my degree and now I'm going to treat eating disorders, because I just don't think that was the way to go. And like, no shade to people that do that. It just, for me, I needed that space, and I needed to know that I was good at something, not just because I had the lived experience.
Mm.
I need,
Yeah.
I needed to know like, oh, I actually have therapeutic skills that I can use, versus just, oh, like I understand what people are going through. So that's because at that point, like that's just like an advocate or a friend. That's not really a therapist. So that I think was really important for me. And ultimately, obviously, I kind of came back around and started working with eating disorders. And I think a lot of why I chose to do it was because, for many years, even in my own recovery, I had a lot of questions about purpose, where it was like, okay, like, why did I survive? Like, why, like, what has been the point of all of this? This like seemingly meaningless struggle. And I think, becoming a therapist and being able to assist people in their healing, and also just be such an instrumental part in people's healing, has been the point. I think so long, like I did really seek out that purpose, and I found it through being able to help people in the way that I was helped, but also just to help them in a way that like I knew was hopefully good for them. And I don't know, like I think too, like being able to work with adolescents was just a really major healing point for me. Just being able to like almost talk to that version of myself and like give, I don't know, like I do feel like some of it, and I think it's just like part of being a therapist sometimes, like your own shit is just going to be in the room. And I heard someone say, I forget what it's like, vicarious healing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
which I think like through working with adolescents and through working in helping so many of them find recovery, I was able to like kind of heal that little part of me that like just that adolescent part of me that had been so sick. So that was really profound for me, and still is every day. I mean, I love the work I do. It's hard. It's absolutely hard, but I cannot imagine at this point doing anything else.
Yeah. That's so beautifully said. And it encourages me, and, not that I'm like surprised by it, of course, you're passionate about the work you do. It's just nice to hear, I think, following our passions is a hard road, and a lot of times it is sort of inlaid with our own sort of personal traumas and experiences that feed into our greatest passions, right? And I think that's a courageous path to take. So good on you for taking it. Sincerely, I think it's important.
Thank you.
Yeah. Jess, what do you think makes you a good therapist?
Ooh. So it's interesting because I don't know. I think just being someone who has struggled with my mental health and had mental illness, like I definitely don't think I'm a good therapist all the time. I think that's just imposter syndrome, and also just, just still struggling with that good old self-worth. But I mean, I think that something I know, like on a lot of days, I certainly feel like I could be a better therapist. But on the days where I do feel like I am a good therapist, I know it's just because I show the fuck up for my clients, and 100%, as much like that is who I am. Like, I think, if I'm going to do a job, I'm going to do it 100%, and I'm going to show up for these people who need me, and also show up with radical authenticity and with a lot of directness and a lot of love. And I think that that's really what makes me good at what I do. Like, it's evident that I care about my clients, and they know it. And I think that that's something that's really important.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I also, Jess, to just meet you halfway, I also struggle deeply, very deeply with self-hate and the feeling like the deep thing is, and I'm actually going to be trying EMDR for the first time this coming week, just in a few days, trying to unpack the deeply entrenched belief that I don't deserve love. Isn't that fucked up? It's a weird fucked up thing, but it's a belief that has fueled all of me forever.
And EMDR is amazing, which, like, of course, I'm going to say that as a therapist, but also I've been on the receiving end of it, and I've pursued that form of treatment, and it really is. It's a game changer.
What did you go to EMDR for? What were you trying to reintegrate?
I mean, I certainly have that good old childhood trauma. That just some of what I had referenced. So that was a lot of those old core beliefs that have hung out and stuck around. And then some other, like, I don't know if it's, I don't know that I care for the big T, little t. Although I understand the use, but I mean, I had some other trauma as well that needed to get approached. And I would probably classify it as big T. So, I mean, it was just really helpful with, like, just helping me kind of be more of a full human in my life. I think it's amazing. It really is.
Yeah. And I appreciate you saying the little T, big T thing, because I had said it, previous in this, just a little bit ago, and thinking about it, I guess it could be seen as like a comparative thing, or like one is less impactful and one is more, and that's just not true. And there's so much more nuance than that. So I think trauma is an important thing to maybe recognize.
Right. I mean, I think there's totally good reason for using those distinctions, but I think, of course, like, people that have suffered trauma or have gone through anything with their mental health might view that as judgmental. I think it's so new. Again, it's so nuanced and it's so individual. It's hard to know what the right thing is sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you someone who, when you are maybe caught up in a self-hate spiral or a I don't deserve love spiral, someone who finds unique and fresh ways to punish yourself?
Ooh.
This is a deeply personal question because I recently did it, and I'll just share the anecdote real quick. Is I yesterday, just real low day, and woke up feeling terrible, woken up feeling very hopeless, and yesterday was in fact Independence Day, a thing that I've never been comfortable with. For as
Sure.
long as I can remember, just it's just a deeply uncomfortable thing. I don't like it. Anyway, so I decided to midday. I guess it was about like 12:30, and it was like 90 degrees probably, and I decided to go take like a 3-hour hike,
Oh, my soul.
and
Oh,
right, and I knew that, like, physically I could do it. Like, I brought a lot of water, but I came back, and at some point my wife said, made the comment that, like, you're punishing yourself. And I think I knew it deep down that I was doing that, but I didn't, I needed the reminder. It's so interesting.
yeah, no, and that certainly that sounds like my nightmare. I'm I'm so sorry that that happened, but I'm glad that your wife pointed it out because I think,
Yeah.
sometimes these, like, especially again, if you have any sort of history of something like an eating disorder where punishing yourself is basically just part of the pathology, it's hard to move away from that sometimes and have objectivity.
Mm.
Um, I mean, I know that more like in my adult life, I think those things are harder to recognize if I am doing something like that. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Because a lot of the things that I might do, like, to punish myself, quote unquote, like, I don't think that I would be able to, like, again, quote unquote, get away with in that, like, I live with another person, and, like, I've set up some really great barriers for myself in terms of, like, if I were ever to want to engage in some sort of eating disorder behavior, there'd be a lot of hoops I would have to jump through to try to figure that shit out.
Right.
But I mean, I think just, like, yeah, having struggled with what I've struggled with, like, it would be really bizarre if I didn't still punish myself in some ways or find some ways to do that.
Yeah.
I'm just not thinking of anything off the top of my head, but I certainly have learned a lot about self compassion over the course of the last 11 years of recovery.
Mm.
And I think I mean, fortunately, that has kept me afloat in a lot of ways. Just like, I could punish myself, but I could also do something else. And,
Yeah.
I feel very grateful that that pathway has been well trodden over time. Is like the I could do something else versus the I could punish myself. Still,
Yeah.
still happens, but
Yeah.
definitely less often.
Yeah. That's good. When you're working with folks who are struggling with eating disorders, like, we're talking about here, like, ways to nourish and not punish. Like, what are some ways that you try to bring in more, try to lean more into, like, teaching them, like, how to nourish themselves as opposed to punishing themselves? Like, what are some of the things you tell them? What are some of the tools that you're trying to get them to develop, or mental blocks that they're trying to break through?
Well, a lot of my clients that I see, I will recommend that they see a dietitian if that's something that's available or accessible to
Mm.
them. Obviously, that's not accessible to everybody, but that is a recommendation I might make because I think food is not so much the therapist's sphere, and it's hard to sometimes have to act as like the therapist and the dietitian. Um, but I think too, like, a lot of the work that I will do with clients around not even necessarily food, but just like nourishing yourself from like a physical and emotional place. It's like you're inherently worthy of nourishment. Like, there's not, like, all of the stories that we tell ourselves or have told ourselves are not true. Like they're just stories, and like there can be a different story, which is like I am inherently worthy of food. I am inherently worthy of doing things that are good for me. Um, so I mean, I think that that's sometimes it is just like baseline self compassion, trying to facilitate that in clients. But I mean, I also recognize, especially in the beginning of a person's recovery, sometimes self compassion is not going to cut it. And a lot of it has to just be like, hey, like, the outcome of doing this in a sustained way is going to be positive. Like,
Right.
sometimes you're selling them more on the outcome in the long term than the in the moment outcome, because anyone that's challenging their eating disorder moment to moment knows it's pretty fucking uncomfortable, especially in the beginning, and just requires a lot of persistence and patience and support. So that's a lot of what I do for clients in the beginning, is supporting them that they are making the right choice and that they are doing something that's positive for them and their future.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And thinking about my, I feel like I'm like always talking about my experience. I'm sorry. I feel
No,
like very selfish in that, but I was just going to share that um, like I didn't seek out any treatment or a therapist or anything during my, except later, obviously therapy, but I'm thinking of like my early recovery days and hearing you say like sometimes it's about just like what will be, right? The projection of the future is so spot on, because I know that for me it was like I couldn't get past like just the specific illness things that I was doing, like the all the mindset stuff, all the emotional baggage, all of that stuff like was gonna take time. But like I knew, so what I did was like, all right, I have to have some like clear um, things, right? Clear like tasks I needed to do, like, and be sort of, I'm not explaining myself well, but like early on it was like,
no, it makes
okay, like, oh, my mom was going to help me like with like she was going to make this like for example this big shake in the morning and put all these things in it, olive oil, like all these things, and this was the thing I would eat, every morning, and like having like those early routines was very helpful.
Yeah, and I think that that's a lot of it, and it's interesting because in the substance use recovery world, they I've heard clients who like from that side of things talk about how in the beginning of sobriety there's like this very strong emphasis on like creating a routine and almost like writing down literally every single thing you do, from like waking up to going to bed, and like just having that as something you could refer to throughout your day. And I'd never thought of it in that way, but I think that is what we encourage clients with eating disorders to do as well. Perhaps not quite as like rigidly, but like, yeah, creating a structure and creating a routine, because arguably an eating disorder really loves those things. So, if you can sort of flip it on its head and create a routine for your recovery, like that can be a really good stepping stone.
Yeah. Is that like based, are those types of things based in like a more of like a dialectical behavior therapy approach, giving clients more like homework type of thing?
Hmm. I certainly pull from DBT. I think that that's just such a great treatment. And shout out to Marsha Linehan, because she's amazing. She was the creator of DBT.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. I appreciated the shout out.
I think like that treatment model is really good for people in early recovery, because there are just like a lot of very concrete skills to use. So I certainly will try to bring that into people's treatment. However, it's interesting. I think a lot, because now a lot of eating disorder facilities emphasize DBT and have DBT as a major part of their treatment model. a lot of clients really dislike DBT because it's just something like they've heard a million times. And
Mm.
so trying to encourage clients to use those skills is sometimes not exactly met with willingness,
Mm.
but it varies. But I think, yeah, I mean, I think just kind of thinking about it from like a problem solving place of like, okay, like how can we create structure in your day in a way that is not completely maladaptive? So, I mean, sometimes it's just that, like, I guess that basic. But I think that that's a lot of what early recovery is. It's just very basic.
Yeah.
You know
Is
that.
there? Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Like thinking about your early experience and my early experience, I guess I'm thinking about how, like, what do you see a common thread of experience for people who ultimately struggle with eating disorders? Like, whether it's like them being a very sensitive person or like them having a childhood trauma, or like, are there some like pretty like rote things that you see again and again in your clients?
Oh, that's such a good question. And honestly, it's a question I get asked a lot because I think there is this like expectation that, oh, like someone has an eating disorder, they must have like, I don't know, check off these boxes.
Right. Right.
And I mean, I think there are some pretty standard universal things like having early childhood anxiety or just like having an anxious temperament. But then I also know plenty of clients who don't have an anxious temperament but still have an eating disorder. Less frequent, but I mean, I think a lot of it just is a really weird conglomeration of things and just how that manifests because like it's the world we live in. Trauma for sure is a huge one, and trauma I think in that way it's not always trauma as we expect so much as like what the person has perceived or interpreted as trauma and how that's kind of lived in their body. I think anxiety, depression, mood stuff. Yeah, I mean it's hard to say because
Yeah.
there are so many things that can create an eating disorder, and I mean, there are certainly like again, like tick boxes that you can check off, but I mean, it's never going to be the same for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, what is your understanding of like just the overall numbers of folks struggling with eating disorders? Like, because
Whew.
as you mentioned earlier, like when you were growing up and experiencing it, there wasn't any information. Like, certainly the same for me. Nowadays, there's a lot more, support. But do you have like an understanding of like how many people nowadays, in 2020 are struggling with eating disorders versus, maybe 20 years ago or 10 years ago even?
That's okay. I don't know. It's interesting because I don't know that the numbers have changed so much. I'm sure on some level they have, but I know now documented. I think it's like something like 30 million people with eating disorders are like in the U.S. I think that was the most recent number that I saw. Um, and that's only what we have like documented or like, people who have been diagnosed. Like that doesn't account for people who aren't diagnosed or like don't have access to care. So, I mean, I'm sure it's an enormous number because it is. I think people really struggle with food across the board. It's just one of those
Yeah.
things that's very common. Relative to like, back in the day, again, I don't know that the numbers are so different. I would think like, yeah, there's been an increase. And also, I think there's a little bit more inclusivity and acknowledgement that, like, oh, not just women have eating disorders, like men have eating disorders. Folks who do not fall along the gender binary have eating disorders, like trans folks. It's not just exclusive to like young women. And finally, that's something that's being acknowledged, which
Hmm.
of course then accounts for a much larger portion of the population.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to bring that up. You mentioned like access to care a couple of times. I've heard eating disorders being described as like, the white woman's illness, right?
Right.
Like why do we why did we get there? Like how did we come upon this, false belief or, false stereotype, whatever you want to call it?
It's hard to say.
Yeah.
That's a question I'm actually not sure of, but I do
Yeah.
know that it's interesting. I feel like there's some similarities between like eating disorders and say like borderline personality disorder, where these things have been largely diagnosed in women and have been seen as like women issues. And I mean, I think that there's a reason for that. Like I think some of the early models of treatment for eating disorders were, I forget the woman's name, but she, this particular woman wrote like the initial book about eating disorders and put a lot of blame on the families and the individual, and how it was again like this individual problem that the like, person was responsible for.
Hmm.
And I mean, I think a lot of these particular issues, especially issues we see as like quote unquote women's issues, uh, I think it is a way to. I'm trying to think of like an appropriate way to say this, but it's like these are ways that we have maligned and oppressed women and pushed them into these boxes. And I think that's probably why it was a woman's issue for a long time, or seen as a woman's issue for a long time. Because it's like, oh, like this hysterical woman, of course she is obsessed with her body and blah blah blah. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
which
That makes
you know
sense.
that might be off the mark, but that's just like my own, I guess, thought about it. Whereas like opening the I guess the world up to be like, oh, a lot of people struggle with this. This isn't just like something specific to women. It makes it more real, and it also means like, oh, it needs to get dealt with. It's no longer just this like pat the person on the head.
Yeah. Yeah. And how about like what about the perspective that like getting treatment for an eating disorder is kind of a privilege?
Right. Which, I mean, I agree with. I think in a lot of ways it is, because for a whole host of reasons, the least of which is that eating disorder treatment is enormously expensive. And I don't even mean just like outpatient care. I mean, like if you want to go to a facility and say you don't have insurance, I mean, that's paying out of pocket for something like that is near impossible.
Yeah.
So it's like having insurance is a really important part of it. And then like even if we think about outpatient, I know that I take insurance, but I am certainly not I'm less common in the eating disorder field for taking insurance. And I understand why, because insurance does not pay well. And given the amount of work that therapists and dietitians do in order to like coordinate care and really provide the most individualistic care, like insurance cannot really pay for that. But I think just in terms of accessibility, like that's a lot of why I take insurance, just to kind of do my part and like really make sure that clients can get good care and for a length of time. But yeah, I mean, accessibility is a major issue in our field.
Hmm. Yeah, I think about it a lot, and it makes me immensely sad thinking about like I go to talk therapy, and I mentioned I'm going to try EMDR therapy, neither of which really take insurance. They'll do like a super bill type of thing, right, where I can like send it into insurance and like being reimbursed. But like even that said, like I'm privileged enough to like have the initial money to like pay for these services. I like and that's kind of like how it's always been and how I've experienced it. And I it's such a there's such a disparity, right? In like I'm a white person of immense privilege and can do these things. And right, what about the people who don't have insurance or don't have that initial money and like can't get treated, like can't like go to therapy, like don't have access to these things? Like I can't imagine like I'd probably be dead, right, if I didn't have access to these things. So how do we, I mean, I know you don't have the answers, but I wonder if you've thought about it. Like, how do we fix that? Because obviously it's a big issue, a big systemic issue.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. I mean, I think there's a huge systemic problem attached to all of this, and American healthcare is by itself an enormous problem. And yet, like, I don't even know that the American healthcare system and its relationship to eating disorders is just fucked. Because for so long, I guess the standard of care was like, oh, this person went to treatment and they gained weight, and then once they've gained enough weight, they're like kicked out of treatment.
Mm,
Which, like, it seems like that has improved some, but I think just overall, the way that insurance approaches eating disorder care or coverage of eating disorder care is certainly problematic. Um, I mean, of course, like, yeah, I don't have the answer to create more accessibility. I mean, I try to, in my own ways, create accessibility. And I think so much of change begins with one person. And I know, like, in the Austin community, there are a number of folks who take insurance, and like discussions of accessibility and inclusivity are a big part of things in our community.
mm.
We do want to create a space that's safe for clients of all and any kind to come and get care. But it's hard. It's so hard because it, yeah, like money is a factor because, like, again, as a therapist and any mental health professional, like, obviously our livelihood is getting paid for the services we provide.
Yeah.
However, there's a level at which you want to be able to provide care even if you're not getting paid. So there's a lot of balance there, and I think part of it probably also comes from our world not really valuing mental health care and thinking, like, yeah, we should do provide these services for free. So I think, like, there are a lot of problems, and a lot of them could probably be fixed with better healthcare. But I mean, that is a huge issue that I would not even know how to tackle or begin to tackle.
Yeah. I think you're right in a way, thinking about like it takes one person and one person at a time. And I like to think of this show in that way, right? Like getting us to access and think about our emotions and think about each other. And it's a big task. It's a big, big task. And, we can't take it on ourselves alone. And we do have to rely on each other. And we do have to like be the one who is like leading by example and hopefully inspiring others to, follow suit. Right. And that's the control we can have for sure. Yeah, that's helpful.
Yeah, I mean,
So
I think so much.
yeah,
Go ahead.
go
I was
ahead.
going to say, I think so much of it is community,
Yeah.
and just being good to each other. I think that's huge.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask, this is a silly question before we get to the last segment of the show. Just because I don't really do this, but I'm feeling it right now because I want a little escape. So, Jess, my question to you is, what have you been watching? What have you been reading? What have been some recent joys in your life?
Ooh, so I'm not a huge reality TV person. However, I have been watching Love Island UK, which I don't know what it is about, like, British slash UK accents. Like, it just brings me so much joy. So I've been just spending an inordinate amount of time watching that, because I just, like, really find it humorous. Um, and I also just finished watching I Know This Much Is True, which was on HBO. Definitely not a joyful show, though, so I don't know how much I would recommend it. I had just read the book many years ago and wanted to watch it. And also, I love Mark, I think it's Ruffalo. I
Oh
can
yeah,
I
Ruffalo.
can
Yeah.
never, yeah, I can never say his name right. Um, And then what have I been reading? Again, my husband teases me so much because I never like watch or read things that are like fun. I am currently reading Know My Name by Chanel Miller, who
Oh, I
was,
read that.
yeah, and it is just such a profound work of literature. Like, I think it's wonderful that, she turned her trauma into something that is very accessible and could be just super helpful to people. And I've really enjoyed reading it. It's a lot. I mean, I think that goes without saying, but it's really been a beautiful, beautiful book to read.
Yeah, I echo that, folks. If you haven't read Know My Name, it is a tough read. She goes into detail. It's all about her sexual assault experience, and it's very hard to get through, but it's so beautifully written, and it's ultimately like so life affirming. And yeah, I loved that book.
Yeah, that's I'm realizing even saying this out loud, I'm like, yeah, I should probably read something like a little lighthearted next. That might be good.
I get it. I find myself in patterns of just reading, more sort of intense nonfiction like that. And lately, reading, things like white fragility and how to be an anti-racist, things like that. And those are important, right? Obviously. But I think it is good to kind of mix it up with some Lord of the Rings or something every once in a while,
Yes.
some Harry Potter.
Ooh.
Well, those are good. So you watching Love Island, where did you watch that? Netflix?
It's on Hulu, I believe.
Hulu, okay.
Yeah, and I don't know. Hulu is like my favorite streaming service because they really have all of the good stuff.
Yeah,
They have like,
we like Hulu.
I don't know. I think like that's, to me, it's better than Netflix, but I don't want to get like, I don't know, like have somebody like blackball me for saying that out loud.
Oh no, it's all right. And Hulu is serendipitously sponsoring this episode, so we're all good. So for me, let's see, I just started a very silly show called 911. It's also on Hulu.
I've heard.
It's with Peter Krause, who, of course, was in my all-time favorite show, 6 Feet Under.
Yes.
And
Oh my God, I love that show.
so good, so good. He was also in Parenthood, which was also very good. Yeah, it's about like a group of like firefighters, like police officers, 911 operators, and it's very dramatic. But it's got some great like Connie Britton's in it, and I love her. It's silly. It's kind of just a silly escape. And I'm watching that on Hulu, and then Jessica and I, let's see. We just watched Ready or Not, which is a like.
Oh yes.
Did you see that?
I haven't seen it, but it's like on my to watch list. My husband didn't want me to watch it by myself because he like saw the trailer and he was like, "I want to watch that. That looks good." I was like, "Okay."
It is good, and it's on. It might be on a couple of places right now. We watched it on HBO, but it's it's very funny. It's ultimately very satisfying in the end. It's there's a lot of blood. It's very grotesque at times, but it's done in a way that's like kind of playful. It was well done. I'm a horror fan.
Me too.
So if you're a horror fan, you don't need to be a horror fan to like this, but I think it helps. It's worth watching. Yeah.
Good to know. Good to know.
Yeah. Yeah. And then what else have I been enjoying? Well, the last thing I'll say is we are caught up and have been watching Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which is like it took me a little time to get into because it's a little bit like I love. Thanks, Scooby. Ew. Sorry, he's like gagging in the background. Old man just laying on the couch, just gagging away. But yeah, Brooklyn Nine-Nine is delightful and
It's
silly,
agree.
and it's also in Hulu. So
Plug.
look at that. Yeah. Listeners, I'll make sure to include all that in the show notes, just for fun, because it's fun and we need joyful things in our lives. Okay, let's talk empathy heroes. This is the part of the show where my guest and I each mentioned an empathy hero, someone in our lives who is very empathetic, could even be a character from a story we love or a movie even. I will go first to give you a moment to think about yours, Jess.
Sure.
My empathy hero this week is Rachel Cargill, who is on. She's big on Instagram. She's also on Patreon. I'm a subscriber to her Patreon. It's called The Great Unlearn, and there's just a tremendous amount of knowledge. She is so bright and so wise. And just yesterday, she posted 4th of July mini syllabus, which links out to some great stuff, including this piece written by Frederick Douglass back in the 1850s called The Meaning of July 4th for the Negro. And she just comes from a very empathetic perspective. And she's just tremendously knowledgeable, and I'm learning a lot from her. So check her out. Again, the Patreon's called The Great Unlearn. Her name's Rachel Cargill. That's Cargle, and she's my empathy hero this week.
Amazing. I agree 100% with that. Empathy hero. She's wonderful.
Nice. How about you?
So I'm going to go with what we were talking about before we started recording. I had been telling Noan about my love of Sean Astin and especially Samwise Gamgee from Lord of the Rings. I'm a huge Lord of the Rings nerd. All of my cats are named after Lord of the Rings characters. And actually
So hold on, back up. So you got Samwise as a cat. What other cats you got?
Then we have Eowyn and Faramir.
Nice. Excellent.
Yes, although Faramir, we really don't call him that. We call him Nugget because he looks like a big old chicken nugget. He's orange. He's super cute. But yeah, so we had we adopted Samwise about almost a year ago, actually, after we had pretty abruptly lost one of our other cats. And yeah, and the reason that we had named him Samwise was because, in the film and in the books, like Samwise really saves the day. I mean, he's like the levity of the story.
Yeah.
And just, there's good in this world and it's worth fighting for. And that's just God. Like that's something that I take with me in everything. And I just such a good character. And Sean Astin just brings him to life and love him. So that's my empathy hero.
That's an amazing one. Do you have Lord of the Rings inspired tattoos?
I don't, but it's been on my certainly been on my list.
Uh-huh.
I do have a cat tattoo. So
nice.
I guess it's like that's sort of Lord of the Rings inspired because they have
There you go.
names.
Yeah, I love it. That's a great empathy hero, and definitely one of mine for sure. Samwise is tremendous. Okay, Jess, where can goddamn Scooby? Are you hearing that?
I am.
Oh, well, you're on air, Scoobs. Thank you for that. Jess, where can folks connect with you?
So I am on Instagram at The Cranky Therapist, and that's, I would say, my primary platform. I also occasionally do the Twitter, and there I am Jess Sprengle LPC. I do have a website, but you can find that on my Instagram. And yeah, generally Instagram is like where you can find me the most.
All right. Well, thank you for that. And listeners, all of those links will be in the show notes for this episode. Jess, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate you, and I'm so grateful that you are, forming and inspiring and helping and enriching young minds
Well,
and old minds.
thank you for saying that.
Just human minds.
Yes, human minds.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me and having such vulnerable conversations. I know these are hard conversations to have in general, especially on a Sunday afternoon. Uh, so I appreciate you, and I appreciate this podcast.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, listeners, as I always say, I'm here, you're here. We're here together on this wayward, overwhelming, awe-inspiring pale blue dot. We have each other. It's you, me, empathy.